Math and Science A-star webinar. Of course, the A-star tips for higher order P6 science questions. This is really very targeted for the higher order, for the higher group of students, those already that you are already doing quite well, okay, but still having some problems in your open-ended question, which is always the major issue that many students have. So today, let me help you to give you a few tips so that you can learn and improve on these few areas before your actual PSLE itself. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Teacher Jace Orr. Of course, I've taught me many times in PSLE P6 classes, and also did my PSLE marking. When I was in doing tuition, I also helped with Marshall Cavendish in publishing their My Pals Are Here science textbook. So this is for the upper block, the P5, P6. And I did my master's in education. So just some background into me. So for me, I'm also known as Science.SG, as Coach Eric mentioned. So we have a philosophy in our teaching, and my philosophy is really to teach hard science and not hard science. So hard science means that I will always want to teach science by helping students to learn and love the subject first, because by learning and loving the subject, that's when they'll start to conquer their fears and get better than what they are already doing in answering their questions. So some of the testimonies that I have from my past years of teaching in different school groups and also tuition groups. Okay, and some parents' results. Okay, of course, been getting quite a few SMSs and WhatsApps from my parents for the P6 prelim results. So quite a few of them did quite well. So I'm happy for them. So for today, the three main areas that I'll be covering, of course, PSLE format and requirements is always one thing that I want to repeat on, because up till now, I know that there are still some P6 parents and students included who do not know exactly what the PSLE format entails. Okay, and there's always one small part that the students don't even know and understand, or the teachers don't even tell them. Okay, then after that, we'll move on to some selected higher order questions from prelims, and then after that, I'll be giving some simple science tips on how you can improve from now to your PSLE. So let's begin. So PSLE format, this one I'm sure all of you know, even parents, you should have heard this from the science HOD in school during the Meet the Parent session, where PSLE paper, you will take out about 30 to 40% of the lower block P3, P4 topics, and upper block, you will take about 60 to 70% of the P5 to P6 topics. So you can see that for lower block topics, there are actually less topics that students learned, and there are actually more topics that the P5, P6 students learn. Of course, for this year, the P6 students, they are getting a bit different paper because of the common last topics that have been taken out. So those are some of the things that students will be facing this year. But of course, next year, we will most probably have all the subjects back as usual. Now, so this is the part that I know some students and parents may still not know. That is for MCQ part and open-ended part. For MCQ, 28 MCQ, there's 14 questions. The first 14 that is on life science topics, and the next 14 questions on physical science topics. So for life science topics here, we are talking about all the topics that have to do with living things. And then for physical science topics, we are talking about all the topics that has to do with the non-living things. So it's very easy to identify which topics are the life science and which are the physical science. But of course, doesn't mean that it will always be one particular life science or one particular physical science all the time. Sometimes there could be some mixture, but that's besides the point. They'll still try to structure it as much as possible with the first 14 MCQ life science, the second 14 MCQ physical science. Even for the open-ended, the first 6 questions of the 12 process skill questions will also be on life science, and the next 6 questions on physical science. So in terms of open-ended questions, we have between 2 marks to 5 marks question, but all of us know that by looking at the marks, MCQ marks still take the highest weightage in terms of the mark range. And by doing well in MCQ, it already guarantees your child a very easy time to pass their paper, and whatever better grades they can get all depends on their booklet B already. So what makes a higher order question? That is always the question, the case that many parents ask. And when we talk about higher order question, there are a few different types of higher order questions. Some are the concept of the question is actually not obvious. So you may get a question, when you get a question and you read through the question, sometimes the concept is not obvious, or sometimes the child may actually have to think about or infer what are some of the concepts that are being tested. And most of the times the clues are actually given in the question. It could be in the pictures, it could be in the question itself, but the student actually had to be able to read through and get the information from there. If students do not have the skills to do that, that's when they can come up with the wrong concept and get their answers wrong. So that's one level of higher order question, where the concept is actually not so clear in the question, or sometimes it could be even multiple questions, like my second point. So some questions, they have multiple topics in the same question, or even multiple concepts from the same topic. So that's when students, when you're doing paper, or parents, when your child is doing the paper, the best thing is always to read the question first, not to straight away go ahead and do, which many students always make the habit of doing, which is not exactly right. Because by doing so fast, they may think that they are saving time for themselves, but what they are doing can actually potentially trip them and cause them to lose even more time. Okay, because the thing is, nowadays there are more and more questions. You can actually go and check the past 3-year papers, go and look through, go and scan through all the open-ended questions. Some questions, they actually have different topics for different parts of the same question. Okay, and it's becoming more and more common. Okay, so students and parents, do watch out for those. Of course, the last type of higher order question, it is always the new situations, because this is written actually in the PSLE science syllabus, where they actually put that new situations will be used to test students on their understanding of application of science concepts. And that's why in PSLE, without a doubt, every year you will get to see totally new questions that you have never seen before. Okay, of course, the concept-wise, it is what you have learned, what you have studied, but it is always these new questions that students are suddenly stuck because they panic, because they have not seen those questions before, because they have not practiced those questions before. They are not sure how to go about answering the question. So this requires a lot of problem-solving skills that the students need to have. Of course, keeping a calm mind and a clear, stable heart would be important for you to think clearly in your PSLE. So when we talk about higher order questions, the features of testing on higher order questions is always still very much on testing understanding of concepts. And if there are certain concepts that students always have misconceptions in, that's when the so-called the questions will actually have to come up with misconceptions to test students whether they have certain misconceptions. Okay, and the testing of application of skills, for example, observation, analyzing using information from tables and graphs, this is also very important. So for science, there are always these few things that you will see. There will always be tables, there will always be lots of pictures, and there will be always lots of graphs. So if your child or students, you are not sure of how to get information from all these sources, be it the picture, the tables, or the graphs, that's when you can actually run into the problem of getting wrong answers from what is actually given to you. If you're not able to interpret and understand what is given to you in the information from the tables and graphs and even the pictures, you can easily make mistakes. Okay, and of course, as I mentioned, if new situations, they are always testing you on your concept of the application of concepts in that particular situation. Sometimes it could be everyday experiences, but sometimes it could be something totally new. So there is always a problem. If a child has gone through particular experiences before and it comes out in the question, it is actually a little bit of an advantage for students to be going through this. But for those students who have not experienced that particular scenario, that's when the student will be at a slight disadvantage, because then they have to really go and think and imagine what exactly is happening in order to answer the question. So let's look at this question. So this question is talking about a particular group of tourists that were trapped in a cave after flooding blocked the exit as shown below. Okay, so how would the gases in the air change after some time? So in this case, of course, this scenario is not really new because it had happened some time ago. Okay, so let me see whether Coach Eric, would you be able to remember where this scenario actually came from?
Okay, it was that particular season whereby it was raining and then this cave got flooded. So these students were actually trapped. I can't remember, but it's very recent, right? Just
a few years ago, correct?
Yeah, very recent. It's very recent, yeah. So yeah, I thought it's interesting because science all testing about real life scenario, right?
Yeah. So that's why I said it's a advantage for students who actually follow news and they read about this, or even if their teachers share in their lessons about what happened, then it is advantage for students who has heard about it.
Yeah, so what I do as a parent, because my own children don't really follow such news, but because there are sort of infographics about what actually happened, this whole scenario, even the rescue process and all that, every time I see one of these, I will actually send it and make sure that my kids have a read.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so in this case, the is really an application of the science concepts in a particular situation. Of course, they did change a bit of the scenario. They thought about tourists instead and not about the children. But the concept is always the same. So in this case, how would the gases in the air change after some time? Students have to learn about their air and respiratory system in order to know about the components of air to answer this. And here the answer is number 3, C and D, where the amount of water vapor increased and the amount of carbon dioxide increased. Oxygen did not increase. In fact, oxygen decreased. And that was one of the reasons why the Thailand government at that time activated the rescuers to go in to rescue the students and their coach out, because the level of oxygen in the cave was actually dropping to quite a dangerous level already. If they were to stay in any longer, they could actually run out of oxygen for them. So that was one of the reasons why they actually go in to rescue them out. Okay, of course, when we talk about carbon dioxide, so this concept is testing on students' understanding of the science concept of respiration, where people will actually respire in a trapped, enclosed space by taking in the oxygen and giving out the carbon dioxide. And also, water vapor is being given out by our exhaling air. Okay, so that's why for this question, even though it's a simple MCQ, but for some students, they actually have problem because they can't imagine or they are not sure that a cave is actually can be enclosed. But the clue is actually given in the question by saying that the cave, they were trapped in the cave after flooding actually blocked the exit. So by blocking the exit, that actually gives you a big clue to tell you that now the cave actually becomes an enclosed situation. Okay, so that's one. Now, another situation where we talk about new experience is that for this is not new. This one everyone knows. Okay, but we talk about dengue fever. Dengue fever develops after a person is bitten by an Aedes mosquito. But there's actually this male mosquitoes that do not bite and spread dengue fever. In fact, male mosquitoes, they only drink water, suck water, and they drink nectar from flowers. Okay? But what happens is that there is these male mosquitoes that can carry a special bacteria, W, which when they mate with the female mosquito, the eggs will not hatch. So male mosquitoes carrying this bacteria are found to live only about 4 days. Then after that, of course, they'll die off. And scientists are actually going to release a fixed number of male mosquitoes with bacteria W to an area. And part B is the question. There's actually part A, but part A was actually testing students on the life cycle of a mosquito. So that one was quite straightforward. So that one I'll skip. So I was talking about B. Explain how releasing the male mosquitoes with bacteria W in smaller amounts more frequently compared to releasing them in larger amounts less frequently can help to ensure that more eggs will not hatch. So even though this is a 1-mark question, but the concept over here is not easy. Okay, the concept here is not easy. So there are a few points that the students must be able to take from this whole chunk of information. Okay, so in science question, there were bound to be some questions that are super long. So what to do with super long questions? My advice to all my students is always to make sure you underline, highlight a few things in your answers. Okay, and what do I mean? Is like looking for treasure in a haystack or in a bunch of words. So you're supposed to look for special words. It's not just about underlining, highlighting everything, but it's about underlining, highlighting specific things. So we talk about the male mosquitoes that are carrying the bacteria W are found only to live only for about 4 days. So that means the male mosquito at the adult stage, they only have 4 days of a lifespan in that sense. So with that, then as the male mosquitoes carrying bacteria W can only live for about 4 days, with more frequent releasing of male mosquitoes in smaller amounts, this will actually ensure that more male mosquitoes can mate with more female mosquitoes to produce more eggs that will not hatch. Because the thing is, if you suddenly release them all together in one go, the male mosquitoes only have those 4 days to mate, to have the eggs not fertilized, so that it will not hatch to become young. Okay, so this question now becomes more difficult. But do you know that Singapore is actually doing this right now? So I know some students do, because I know when I asked my P6s, some of them actually told me that their teachers actually shared to them about this. Singapore has been doing this for a few years now, and that is actually known as Project Wolbachia. Project Wolbachia, that's why it's called bacteria W, because Wolbachia is actually a special bacteria in male mosquitoes that cause them to become infertile, which means that they cannot fertilize eggs. Okay, they cannot fertilize eggs. So this is another situation whereby the daily or the news is actually there for you to know and to listen to. Okay. Now, moving on, let's talk about this open-ended question where we have 2 magnets, X and Y. So to test if these 2 magnets could still be used, he bought both magnets near 2 paper clips, and you could see that there are 2 paper clips that both magnet X and Y got attracted. But he can carry out another part of the experiment now using 6 paper clips. The paper clips were attracted to magnet M, to magnet X, but when he repeated the same experiment with magnet Y, the paper clips were not attracted. Okay, so then that's when the question has to revolve about what happens. So give one possible reason to explain why only magnet X was able to attract the paper clips. So usually for PSLE question, even your PSLE this year, for those P6s, there will be some giveaway questions, even in open-ended. They are straightforward questions like part A here, where magnet X has a greater magnetic strength, is very easy for students to write. Students just need a few seconds to think and a few seconds to write down. These are what I call giveaway questions. So, but giveaway questions, you have to take note, it appears in quite a number of questions from the beginning to the last question. So for students, if you have problems with your time management, that means you always find that you tend to rush your science paper and finishing your last question in the last few minutes with only very few minutes left to do your checking, you have to be careful, because should any of the questions you take too long, especially in MCQ, that will snowball your time to your open-ended. Even though there could be giveaway questions in the open-ended questions, but you may not have time to even come to them to answer them. Clear? So my advice to all my students is always the same thing. Don't take too long in a tough question. If you find that you're taking too long, always time yourself. If you can time yourself, always time yourself. If you take too long, then quickly move on first. Go and do all those giveaway simple 1-mark questions first before coming back to answer the tough questions. Clear? So as usual, this year, there will be certain tough questions that will come out, but you just have to be prepared for them. Don't always ensure that you don't stay too long on them. So part B, based on the above setups, name the forces that are acting on the floating globe. So this is another application part. So just now at part A, it was still testing students' understanding of particular science concept. But for PSLE questions, the higher order part of the questions always comes in the later part, where they bring in the application. So this is a floating globe with an electromagnet. And nowadays, there are more and more of these kinds of devices that are out there. I know some of you may not have even seen this before, but some of you have seen this before. And for my students, of course, I show my students many of these kind of cases before, so that when they were to do this question, they can see and they can understand what is going on. But for those of you who have not seen this before, same thing. When we see the questions based on the above setup, name the forces, the thing that I will get my students to underline, highlight is always name the forces, because that is already the question asking you to write your answers in a particular way. So you have to write out your answers, gravitational force and magnetic force, the two forces that are acting on the device here. But again, besides the concept, there's always the explanation part. And explanation part, you must ensure that your science concepts are written in your answer. The science concepts are written in your answer. Now, why I chose this question was when I saw this question, the answer key that was given explained how the electromagnet allows the globe to float in the air. The answer key was just saying that the electromagnet was repelling the floating globe. That's all. And that was actually given an answer key. But that was a wrong answer. Okay, why do you get wrong answer keys in the past year papers? That is because the past year papers, all the printers that are printing the past year papers outside, they are just using the answers that the students wrote. Okay, they are just using the answers that the students wrote. The answers are not the teacher's answer key. Clear? So what should you be writing? When you're writing for electromagnets like this, magnetism is always asking for particular magnetic concept, and that is talking about the repulsion force here. The light poles of the electromagnet and the magnet in the globe, there should be a magnet in the globe. But over here in the picture, you can't see. The student must be able to know that there's a magnet in the globe, must be able to infer that in order to put it into the answer, to answer the question. So the light poles are facing each other, and so that's why the repelling happens, and so that's why the globe floats. Clear? So without the concept, or some students, nowadays, students may write halfway. Okay, like what I said, the student's answer key, talking about repulsion, that the electromagnet was just repelling the floating globe. That is actually not enough. In P3, P4, yes, maybe that is enough. But by the time you come to P5, P6, and PSLE, those kind of answers will not be enough. And please take note. Up till now, I still have students coming to me and telling me that they don't know that PSLE now, there are no more half marks. There are no more half marks given in PSLE marking, which means that for a question like this with a 1-mark answer, if your answer is incomplete, it will be 0 straight away. Okay, it will be 0 straight away. So the light poles of the magnets are facing each other is the part of the answer that has to come together with repelling. If you write one or the other without both, that's when your answer is considered incomplete and you will be straight away a 0. Clear? So that's what the higher order questions are looking for also. You must be able to know and understand and answer the questions accordingly in order to get the full marks. Next question, we have this spring and there's a mass on it. So EC carried out an experiment on 2 different types of spring, X and Y of the same length using the setup as shown in diagram 1. So she used the compression of the spring after adding a mass, and her results are shown in the table below. And this is the results. Now, why I chose this question is because for many spring questions, the commonly tested questions are always about extension, about how much the spring is being stretched. Okay, because the spring is hanging from maybe a support or ceiling, and then after that, the masses are added on it, and then it stretches longer and longer. But these questions becomes tricky because it is taken in the compression mode. So when you're taken in the compression mode, basically means that the length of compression of spring, once you are having more and more mass, the spring is actually compressing more and more. So the students, when you're able to read this and understand this table, you're supposed to be able to see that the table is actually talking about the length of the compression of the spring is actually getting shorter and shorter from the original length. So what they're measuring is how much the spring actually gets compressed from the original length. Now again, for part A, questions like this, when we talk about relationship, it is always very easy for students to come up with relationship. This is one of the easiest kind of questions that you'll get. Even for your PSLE this year, you will definitely get about 1 to 2 relationship questions. 1 mark that is given to you. So make sure you are able to identify the factor and the results clearly. Okay, because I know for my P6 students, some of them still get their factor and results confused. What do I mean by factor and results? Factor basically means that is the change variable that is going to affect the results. So in this case, the change variable is actually the number of masses that are added. And you can see that it increases from 100 to 200 to 300 to 400. So when you add on the masses, it becomes more and it increases. And that's when you look at the length or the compression of the springs. Over here, they didn't specify whether it's X or Y because they are not comparing between them. They are just looking at them generally. So in both cases, the length or the compression of the spring both increases, of course, at different rates, but that's not the main focus in this part A. The part A is just looking at the general relationship here. Part B, what is the purpose of the pin? This has come out as a PSLE question once before, where it was also about another spring, but here, the purpose of the pin in the original question, it was actually to indicate the reading that is shown on the ruler. So it's pointing actually to the ruler. But so what is exactly the purpose of the pin? It is just to ensure that the results are accurate as the pin points directly to the marks on the ruler so that the readings can be measured, the readings can be recorded. Now, what is one common problem that students have for this? Some students, they memorize answers. So when they memorize answers, they don't go and think about whether the answers is exactly answering the question. And the kind of answer that some students, they will regurgitate or they will write out because they memorize it is to ensure that the results are reliable. But reliable results, they are different from accurate results. Reliable basically means that the results, the few results that are obtained through many experiments that are being done repeatedly, they are all quite close together. once they're all quite close together, it's very easy to use them to find an average, to find the reading or the results that's in between all the results that you have gathered. So that is reliable results, but accurate results is different. Accurate results is giving you a better or more accurate number so that you can get a more accurate result. Clear? Okay, so when we talk about the spring, of course, now comes the application part, the higher order thinking question. A spring is used to make a candy dispenser as shown in diagram 2. So part C, when EC remove a few pieces of candy quickly from the top, the metal disc move up continuously. Name 2 types of force acting on the metal disc. So in this case, the 2 forces that are acting on the metal disc is the elastic spring force and the gravitational force that is acting on all the candy that is in there. Okay, so these 2 kinds of forces, most students are still able to get it, which is still quite straightforward. But again, this kind of application comes from something that you may or may not have seen. Okay, so let's ask Coach Eric again. Coach Eric, do you know where or have you seen this kind of candy before?
Yes, I think it starts with the letter P.
Yes.
Pears or something. When my kids were younger, I used to buy this, but I think I find that's the because it's too fun, you see, so kids keep popping in.
Yeah, correct. They always like to play with the springs. That's always a common thing. Yeah, so it's again something experienced, but I know that some children they may not have even seen this because it's not exactly very common everywhere. Yeah, so that's when they may not, or they may even have this, but they don't know that there's actually a spring inside, because they'll just take the candy and eat, but without going into the thought of the scientific application. Yeah, so that's always the thing. Yeah. Thank you, Eric. Okay, so now part D is always the higher order question. 2 marks. EC wanted the candy to move up faster. So based on the results in table 1, which spring X or Y should she use in the candy dispenser? So now the student has to actually go back all the way to the front again to think of the 2 springs, X and Y, which was used at the beginning. And then from there, think about which one to use, making the correct choice. Second one, compare between the 2 of them and make the comparison clear. And third one, of course, bring in the science concept here. So in this case, the choice should be on spring Y, because in the table that is given, the length of the compression of spring Y is actually less than that of spring X when the same mass is placed on it. Okay, so that is the comparison part that the students must write. And that is what some of your teachers, for those of you who learn the CER method, the claim evidence, the claim would be the spring Y, the evidence would be these results, this comparison in results that comes from the table. But there's always the reason, which is the science concept. Now, in this case, we are looking at energy. So in terms of energy, this is what I call the special explanation, where there will be more elastic potential energy in spring Y than spring X when they are compressed to the same length. That is converted to kinetic energy of the metal disc, which is then converted to kinetic energy of the candy. So there's energy conversion that needs to be used to answer as the science concept in this question itself. Okay, right. So coming to this question here, we have this candle wax. I'm sure many of you don't know what this is all about, because for me, I also have not seen this at all before. Okay, so this is a candle holder, which is quite special because it's a newly designed candle holder by this person called Mandy. And what happens is that it helps to reuse candles. So diagram 1 shows a lit candle being placed onto the candle holder, and while diagram 2 shows the same candle after 10 minutes. So after 10 minutes, the candle will have burned off and you have gotten shorter. Which property of melted wax actually allows it to be collected in a cylindrical container. So this question is actually testing students on their understanding of matter. So in terms of matter-wise, melted wax actually has no definite shape. Why? Because once wax is melted, it has become liquid state. So that is what this part A is testing students on. So, but part B, moving on, when the old candle is being used up, the candle holder has to be left untouched for some time before opening the cylindrical container to obtain the newly created candle. Explain why. Still on matter, but this question now is no longer looking at properties of matter, but this is moving on to states of matter. So the topic has actually changed from matter, from properties of matter, to now talking about the states of matter. So as the candle is left untouched, the melted wax in the cylindrical container is actually losing heat to form a solid again. By putting the candle wax into the container, you need the candle wax to lose heat to solidify to become a solid again, in order for it to be used, okay, in the new way. And for part C, suggest one thing that Mandy could change in her design so that the new candle would be of a cube shape shown. So of course, usually this kind of question is again another giveaway. Suggestion is only requiring you to write out what you can tell Mandy to do. It is not about answering the question with a science concept anymore. So here, Mandy could change the cylindrical container to a cube container. Okay, to a cube container, so that the candle wax can now form a cube shape. Now, part D. I'm sure for matchboxes, not many people would have used matchboxes before, because nowadays, if we need to have any flame or fire, usually we use fire starters, or we use those fire guns. So explain why the matchstick head and the side of the matchbox have to be rough for the matchstick to light up. So again, another application to the question, but this part D is no longer on matter, no longer on states of matter. This question now has gone on to forces. So when the matchstick head and the side of the matchbox is rough, there is more frictional force between the matchstick head and the side of the matchbox, which produces more heat between them, and that causes the fire on the matchstick head. So the key concept here is talking about more frictional force so that more heat can be generated to start the fire on the matchstick. So this is on forces. And are they exactly in the same team? No, they are not in the same team also. Okay, because matter is in the team of diversity, but for forces is in the team of interactions. So how should you score in your prelims and how to make use of it? So I'm sure most of you are getting back your papers, prelim papers. Some of you have already gotten back your papers. Some of you are still in the process of getting back. Analyze your mistakes. Be it those of you who scored A star that have few mistakes, you still need to analyze your mistakes, because if you made a mistake, that means there's still some gaps and weak areas that you need to check on. So when you look at your questions in your prelim papers, take note, is it a key concept error that you need to revise and to remember? If it is, then please go and revise and remember in these few weeks before your PSLE. Because if it's not corrected by PSLE, then it could again easily be another error in your PSLE. Clear? So if you need help, always get your teachers to help you, your tutors to help you, or even online on Facebook to get specialized groups with experienced teachers to help you, because your time is limited. You only have these few weeks left before PSLE. Now, of course, PSLE science tips, just like I love what Coach Eric does with his kids by sending them news. But of course, news is one thing. There will always be many situations where you can also get to do it yourselves. Because for PSLE questions, there will always be many examples of things and applications that has to do with nature, living things. So for this, some of you will have to watch videos, because with COVID-19 and we are still in a situation where we cannot really go out freely. Watching videos is definitely one of the ways to see and understand things. Okay, so for example, like 2018, there was the cuckoo bird question. 2019, there was the polar bear and the orchid mantis question. Not only that, find out about how things work. You can easily go online to Google and to find on how things work, because even questions can come out like sushi belt in a sushi restaurant, conveyor belt in a sushi restaurant for PSLE 2018, the misting fan for PSLE 2016, the ambulance electrical toy for PSLE 2019. All these are things that you may have experienced, but again, you may not know exactly how it works. So go and find out. And of course, in your questions for PSLE, the higher order thinking skills are always the ones that will test you on how the science concept will be applied in various ways. It could be daily situations, it could be other situations. Some you have seen, some you have experienced, and some you have not. And these are the ones that will always be the deal breaker between you getting your A's and your A stars. So please remember, when you're learning science, next time, even when you move on to secondary school, for those of you in P6, always try to understand how by understanding the concept, and the concrete concept is really learning from your textbooks, learning from the what MOE requires you to learn, but also understanding about the concept is important, and understanding about the connection is important, how it is actually applied to questions itself. Clear? Okay, right. For me, I'm also organizing some last lab classes for September PSLE, and even for the P5 SA2. So coming up, some of the offers that I will show on your offer page. So the first one to come up is actually the PSLE Hot Topics question. Okay, so for this is the one that I'm offering a short promo of $30 off for limited time only. Okay, because I only have limited seats left. So this will be on Sundays, on the 6th and the 13th. So this is the last lab revision, where all the hot topics that are coming out in your PSLE will be gone through. Okay, so that is the first one across 2 Sundays. Next one, I have the PSLE Decoding open-ended question. For this session on the 10th and 11th, Thursday and Friday morning, this will be the one that will be focusing on helping students to answer the open-ended questions, looking into all the different clues, into all the different types of open-ended questions, in order to know what is the whole entire range of open-ended questions that students can get for their PSLE. Okay, so that is the one for this 10th and 11th. And bonus add-on, I'll be also sending out some bonuses with this for the attendees, which will be the primary science common misconceptions upper block videos that I've made, and also some e-infographic revision package for common misconceptions for students. So all these offers are valid only for one day, And for P5s, not forgetting about you, because P5s, you also had a tough year this year with all the home-based learning. There will be concepts that you will face gaps. There will be concepts that you will be facing gaps. And you need to get those gaps closed up, covered up, built up before your P6 year next year. Once P6 year comes, you will find that you have limited time. Okay, so last 3 early bird seats left. After that, prices will be back to normal. Okay, so please take note. Some of the critical concepts, basically, I'm also going through some of the key concepts for the key topics that P5 students actually go through. And knowing that P5 topics and P6 topics, P6 you only have 9 months, so P5 topics, 1 full year of topics, will also come out and be tested more in PSLE every year. Okay, in fact, P5 year is considered the most crucial year actually. Okay, so there's some parent testimony of my classes here. And some of my other classes for this, you can actually go onto my website to find out more. So coming to the end, thank you so much. These are my contact information, my email, my phone number, and my website. So of course, my phone number may not always be on because I'm already teaching quite a lot of classes. So the best way to contact me is still through email, okay? And I will get back to you as soon as possible if you have any queries.